Live. Okay, and we're live. So welcome everyone, Hare Krishna, to our weekly virtual Sunday feast. Before I turn it over to tonight's speaker, Hari Sham Prabhu. Quick announcement. So the temple hours, most of us may be aware that the temple is now open on a very limited capacity. The temple hours are Friday through Sunday, 4 o'clock until 6:30 p.m. for darshan only. This means that any festivals, events like this weekly Sunday Feast program will continue to be virtual until further notice as things start to open up a little bit, but we'll be keeping it virtual for now in compliance with local health standards and out of consideration for all of our well-being. On that note, I'll turn it over to His Grace Hari Sham Prabhu, who will be speaking tonight on Conundrums. This is part 7 of the Brilliant series, which so far is on its 7th week, where we do a flyover of Srimad Bhagavatam chapters. And so Hari Sham Prabhu was kind enough to speak on tonight's topic. And many of us may be familiar with him. Got his start in Chicago, and then has come back to Chicago and has put in a lot of effort to reinvigorate the ISKCON Chicago outreach in many different ways. He's now responsible for the resuscitation of Krishna Lunch, which is now, as a plug-in, available for delivery across the city of Chicago, and is quite tasty if you haven't tried it yet. And he also leads the center on the near south side near the Illinois Institute of Technology's campus. So on that note, turn it over to Hari Sham Prabhu. Thank you so much for speaking this evening.
Hare Krishna, Yashodanandan Prabhu, and my humble obeisances to any and all devotees who are currently tuned into this session. Real quick, Yashodanandan Prabhu, am I sounding nice and clear? The audio is crisp. Is the audio good?
Yeah, yes.
Good, awesome, thank you so much. So my dear devotees, before we begin this evening, I just want to make a few comments before I begin my presentation. We're at a very interesting point in the world's, you could say, journey. There's a lot happening in the world right now. For anybody who follows social media or the news, you all know what I'm referring to. There's a global pandemic. There's riots against, racial injustice. There are protests. There is economic instability. There's so much happening in the world. And as practitioners of Bhakti Yoga, as students of the School of Devotion, we need to know what is our perspective. It's really important in life to have your own roadmap to reality. I really like this phrase, a roadmap to reality. Who do we think we are, and how do we explain what's happening in the world today, and what is specifically our responsibility or our response to what's happening in the world? And I'm sure many of you have been watching some of the amazing online presentations by senior devotees across ISKCON on these issues. So I'm sure you have your own perspectives, and I would encourage you as part of today's presentation to please bring those perspectives in the form of comments or questions in the YouTube chat. You can post your comments and questions there, and I would love to hear them, and we would love to discuss them as a community. So I encourage you to please do that. I also would like to say that I know that in the past couple of weeks, we've had some very exalted speakers speak at ISKCON Chicago Sunday Feast. So I'm very young and I'm very immature and undeveloped. So today will be a good opportunity for all of you to develop some tolerance. It'll be a good opportunity for you to develop some tolerance. And please just ignore any shortcomings in my presentation as a result of my immaturity or, just lack of development in Krishna consciousness, and try to take the essence of what I have to share, because what I'm sharing today isn't coming from me, it's coming from our acharyas, the gurus in our line, and therefore there's some substance there, it has value, but I have no value, I have very little substance or value, but the actual material itself has a lot of value. So we're going to look at the 7th chapter of the 1st canto today. And before I begin, I would like to offer my humble obeisances to our Guru Parampara and their dear Lordship Shri Kishore Kishori in the form of the Mangala Charana. So I know that you're watching on YouTube and you're not on Zoom. so I cannot hear you chant. But if you could take a few seconds to recite with me the Mangalacharna, I think that'll be a very nice, auspicious way to begin today's discussion. Om Agyanante Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, Hare Krishna. It's so empowering and it's so uplifting to chant the Mangalacharna. I automatically feel so many blessings coming into our association by reciting those mantras. Allow me to please share my screen with all of you. Just give me a few seconds while I get this ready. The presentation is right here. And let's see. Zoom, share screen. There we go. Trying to share my screen. Okay, great. I assume Ishadananda Prabhu, my screen is shared, right? I think it's fine. I think it's shared. Should be.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So our discussion today is on the 7th chapter of the 1st canto, which is the story of Srila Vyasadeva Samadhi and also the story of Ashwatthama, the son of Dronacharya. And we titled our presentation today, Conundrums. Conundrum essentially describes a situation where one doesn't know what to do. As you can see in this little graphic here, there's a businessman, presumably, or just someone in a suit, who is looking at a series of paths before him. There's many paths, they're all sort of overlapping. He doesn't know which one to pick. And in a way, this is sort of a universal theme, isn't it? Every single day we have to make decisions, and sometimes we don't really know where these decisions will take us. It's a conundrum. Or in Sanskrit, the actual term in Sanskrit is a dharma sankat. Dharma means the path of righteousness or virtue, the correct path, the right path. And sankat means a problem. Which is the correct path? Which is the right path? So, and it's ironic, as soon as I finished making this presentation, someone called me and presented me with a certain scenario and asked me, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And what should I say in this situation? And I thought it was so ironic that here I just finished making a presentation on conundrums or how to make decisions, and Krishna presented an opportunity to try to apply some of the things I was talking about. So I think each and every one of us online today makes decisions in life. That's just part of living life. And, we don't always know where these decisions will lead us, and how do we make those decisions. So this chapter is very profound, and especially in today's circumstance with what's happening in the world, it's very important to have a good set of ideas that influence our decision. So let us begin our presentation. So we're looking at Canto 1, Chapter 7, which deals with the story of Ashwatthama and the vision of Srila Vyasadeva. You can see the vision of Srila Vyasadeva is displayed over here on the right-hand side of my presentation. Vyasadeva was the great sage who compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he had a great vision in which he saw the Supreme Lord, he saw the living entity, and he saw the material energy and how the material energy binds the living entity. So we will take a look at this. In the chapter itself, chronologically, it comes before the story of Ashwatthama. But I would like to start today with the story of Ashwatthama and end with the vision of Vyasadeva for a particular reason. So without further ado, let us go through the story of Ashwatthama, the son of Dronacharya. And before we do, just a quick sort of summary of what are some of the important themes that I'd like to bring up in today's discussion, and we'll circle back to this at the end. But in this pastime of Ashwatthama, you find themes like forgiveness, justice, and punishment. These are all issues that are very relevant in the social landscape today. You see this need to acquire clarity. Clarity is a very important quality in order to make good decisions, in order to make proper decisions. How does clarity come about? How can we have clarity in our minds? Understanding something called the circle of influence, right? We all have a circle of influence, right? I can do things that affect the people in my immediate vicinity. I may not be able to influence politicians in Washington, D.C., right? So what is my circle of influence? And then acting within that circle of influence. So for a lot of times, people have kind of an inflated idea of what is their circle of influence. They're worried about problems and issues that are outside their circle of influence, and therefore there's no room to act on those issues. So they remain issues, right? Like say, for example, I'm concerned about something happening in some temple or some country somewhere at the other end of the planet where I don't know anyone and I have no influence, and this is really bothering me. Well, I'm not able to act in that situation. The situation will continue to agitate me and bother me. So the solution is to understand what is my circle of influence and how can I act within my circle of influence, because only when we act within our circle of influence does the problem get solved, right? It no longer bothers us. And finally, what does it mean to make decisions from a spiritual perspective, right? We'll look at that dimension today. Decision making from sorry, I apologize for that sound. There's we live our center, our preaching center is right near downtown, and it's near this main strip, and there's no way to really control that flow of traffic. So apologize for the sound disturbance. So yeah, what does it mean to make decisions from a spiritual perspective? Let's move on here. So what is the story of Ashwatthama? The story of Ashwatthama begins really when Shukadeva Goswami wants to introduce the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is a conversation within a conversation within a conversation. And the heart, the root conversation that sprouts all the other conversations is a conversation between King Parikshit, who is the grandson of Arjuna, one of the greatest warrior in the Mahabharata, with Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Srila Vyasadeva. So now Shukadeva Goswami wants to explain the story of King Parikshit. How was Parikshit saved from the womb of his mother? And how did it come about that he began to have this dialogue on the Srimad Bhagavatam? So to explain the story of King Parikshit, he has to explain the story of Ashwatthama. They're linked. So this is the introduction to Ashwatthama in the 7th chapter of the 1st canto. And who is Ashwatthama? He's the son of Dronacharya, who is the guru of Arjuna. This is a very important detail that'll come up later in this chapter. As you can see here, a very nice visual of little Arjuna being trained in archery by Dronacharya, his guru. And Ashwatthama was the son of Arjuna's guru. Ashwatthama was very upset because he was on the side of the Kauravas, represented by Duryodhan, and of course Emperor Dhritarashtra, and they had lost the Battle of Mahabharata. They had been defeated very badly by the Pandavas, actually. And so Ashwatthama was very, very upset at having been on the losing side. Nobody likes to lose, right? Nobody likes being powerless. Nobody likes being the one who's defeated. So in order to avenge his defeat, in order to feel some sense of power, and here's a very interesting psychological dimension, when people feel powerless, they might act out and do something very violent and indecent just to feel a sense of power or control in their life because they feel so embarrassed or humiliated to have lost, to have been defeated. So what does he do in this state of madness? He kills the sleeping children of Draupadi. Draupadi was the wife of the 5 Pandavas, and from each of those 5 Pandavas, she had one son. And these little boys were sleeping peacefully in their tent, and Ashwatthama killed them in their sleep. This is extremely cowardly. It's an extremely wicked and vile act. Even in today's times, when there's a war or there is some violence and soldiers kill innocent civilians, Even today, this is not appreciated. What to speak of little children, right? When there was some time ago, a terrorist entered a school in Pakistan and killed 40 children. This is a horrible crime against humanity. I mean, people are always offended and upset when there's a terrorist attack, but it's even more heinous when it's against innocent people like women and children, right? So he killed these 5 sons of Draupadi in their sleep, and he took those heads, the heads of these 5 little children, to his you could say his boss Duryodhan, as a symbol of, look what I've done. Aren't you happy with me? And Duryodhan was absolutely disgusted. He felt Duryodhan was actually, in one sense, he was virtuous. He was a warrior, so he knew the code of a warrior, and he knew that this is not proper. You don't kill sleeping children. You don't kill children. What to speak of sleeping children? So he very much abhorred and sort of was disgusted by this action. On the other, and so his action was very much looked down upon by everyone. But as a result of this great activity, Draupadi, who was the mother of the Pandavas, became very, very upset. And she, Arjuna, who was the father of one of these 5 boys, promised his wife Draupadi that he will bring her the head of Ashwatthama and the blood of Ashwatthama. And so he set off on a course of seeking revenge to punish Ashwatthama. And here we see this is correct, because Ashwatthama did something wrong, and therefore he deserves to be punished, even though he was the son of Arjuna's guru. Despite that, Ashwatthama deserves to be punished. And Ashwatthama, out of fear of Arjuna, because Arjuna was a great warrior and Krishna himself was driving his chariot, releases a Brahmastra weapon. It's very interesting what a Brahmastra weapon is. Prabhupada compares it to a nuclear weapon, and these weapons were released by the sound of mantras. So Srila Prabhupada explains that all modern science is trying to do is trying to, you could say, manipulate matter, right? You have matter and you manipulate it to create some sort of machine or device that makes life a little bit easier to live, a little bit simpler, right? So previously you had just iron, then modern science figured out a way to make steel from iron, and then somebody figured out how to bend those pieces of steel and make tools. And from that came more complicated tools and things like cars and trains and things like that. So essentially it's a game of how do you manipulate matter. So one way to manipulate matter is through physical, tangible forces, right? Another way to manipulate matter is through sound vibration. The energy within sound vibration, it can be used to kind of formulate matter in such a way that it becomes a weapon, a force of attack. If some of you are kind of, I don't know if anybody here is a teenager or someone young, but recently Prahlad was telling me about a cartoon called The Airbender. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of an airbender, but it's something similar. The Ashwatthama had the power to sort of take, create weapons out of thin air and then use that as a force against his enemy. And particularly the weapon he created was the Brahmastra, a very powerful weapon. And it was so powerful that it kind of covered the whole sky and the whole earth, and with clouds, and there was a darkness, and there was sort of fear all around. And Arjuna became a little uncertain on what he must do at this point. So what does Arjuna do? Very nice example of what Arjuna does, because he's confused, he doesn't know what to do, so he does what a devotee should do. And I can't hear you, but I'm going to ask the question anyways. What does a devotee do when he doesn't know what to do? Right? Is this a catch-22 question? Like, what do you mean, what does he do when he doesn't know what to do? He doesn't know what to do. Let me ask my question again. What does a devotee do when he doesn't know what to do? Think about that for a second. I think the answer is pretty obvious. He turns to Krishna. So he offers Krishna beautiful prayers, taking shelter of him. He takes shelter of Krishna through his prayers. And Srila Prabhupada writes about this dynamic, this relationship between a devotee and the Lord in his purport to text 25 of the 7th chapter of the 1st canto. What is this dynamic between the devotee and the Lord? Prabhupada writes here, it appears that the Lord is partial to his devotees. It appears that way because Krishna is taking the side of his devotee. Everyone is related with the Lord. He's equal to everyone, and yet he is more inclined to his own men and devotees. Srila Prabhupada writes it like this in his own charming English, his own men and devotees. So the idea is Krishna is equally related to all living entities, but he has a particular charm for his devotees. The Lord is everyone's father. No one can be his father, and yet no one can be his son. His devotees are his kinsmen, and his devotees are his relations. This is his transcendental pastime. It has nothing to do with mundane ideas of relations, fatherhood, or anything like that. What are we meant to draw from this purport, this point by Srila Prabhupada? That if we enter into a compact of love, this language of Srila Prabhupada is a compact of love or relationship with Krishna, then we come within his inner circle. We become part of Krishna's inner circle. And then whenever we need Krishna's assistance or help, or we don't know what to do, we can turn to Krishna because we have now become one of his kinsmen, as Prabhupada writes. We have entered into a relationship with Krishna. So what does Krishna do? Krishna instructs Arjuna to counter the Brahmastra weapon with his own Brahmastra weapon. Krishna tells Arjuna what has happened, that this weapon has been released by the son of Gautami, who is the wife of Dronacharya, and he does not know how to retract this weapon. And certainly this weapon is going to destroy the earth. So please, you release your own weapon to counteract this weapon. And Arjuna is well trained in martial arts. He was a very good student of Dronacharya. So he immediately did so. And by his release of the Brahmastra, he was able to counter Ashwatthama's Brahmastra and therefore able to capture and arrest Ashwatthama. He tied him up, basically like you tie up an animal, right? Just like, most devotees don't have dogs, but a lot of people have dogs. And when you take your dog for a walk, you tie him with a leash. That's what you do to an animal, because an animal is uncontrollable by nature. So when someone is treated like an animal, they're tied up because their behavior is unpredictable. You cannot know if this dog will run here or there. Therefore, you tie him up to control him. It signifies two things. One, that the behavior of this creature cannot be predicted and is unpredictable. And secondly, it shows who is the master in this relationship, because the master is the person who holds the leash, right? So when you see a dog, well, sometimes it's funny because you see people walking their dogs and the dog is so big and powerful that he's kind of leading the master. So you can't tell who is the master in that situation, But generally speaking, whoever holds the leash, that's the master. That's the person in charge. What Srila Prabhupada writes here, commenting on Arjuna's arrest of Ashwatthama, Prabhupada writes, the significant point in this shloka is that Ashwatthama was caught and bound up with ropes like an animal. According to Sridhar Swami, Arjuna was obliged to catch this son of a Brahmin like an animal as part of his duty or dharma. This suggestion, I think the bus was really loud, I'll repeat that point. This suggestion by Sridhar Swami is also confirmed in the later statement of Sri Krishna. Ashwatthama was a bona fide son of Dronacharya and Kripi, but because he had degraded himself to a lower status of life, it was proper to treat him as an animal and not as a Brahmin. Why did I highlight this quote? I highlighted this quote to show that even though we are practitioners of bhakti and we're trying to be devotees, a wrong action is a wrong action. Somebody who commits wrong, then it is completely right to say, yes, this is incorrect, and because of this person's actions, they should be punished. There is room for proper punishment also in the Vedic path, right? But how do you determine who should be punished and all of that? That's a whole other discussion, right? But here we're just seeing that according to the laws of Dharma, what Ashwatthama did was very improper. Even though he was the son of a Brahmin, still because of his actions, he was degraded to a lower status of life. And this also is Prabhupada's way of saying that, just because you're born a Brahmin doesn't make you a Brahmin. Just because you're born to a Brahmin family doesn't make you a Brahmin. Just because you're born in a devotee family may not make you a devotee. Your actions, our actions, define who we are. Our actions determine if you're in a higher or lower status of life. And I'll come back to this point at the end of my presentation, that ultimately the value of a person, the value of a person's character is really calculated by their actions. It all boils down to our actions. It's not, yes, knowledge is important, right? Our thoughts are important. But if our thoughts don't translate into virtuous, good action, but translate into bad or impious actions, then that's really where we're at in life, right? We cannot know many good things and act incorrectly. That doesn't count, right? If you know what's the right thing to do, then we have to do the right thing. And that's how we become elevated in life, by doing the right thing. Action is very important. So we'll go to the next slide here. Okay, so after Arjuna has arrested Ashwatthama and brought him before his wife Draupadi and the other Pandavas, there is an interesting tension that arises, right? What happens, we see in the scene here, there's an interesting tension, and you can see on my left-hand side the text, Draupadi, being a gentle and forgiving woman, now wants to forgive Ashwatthama. Draupadi is a pure devotee of Krishna. We have seen her greatness and her glories in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And she feels empathy seeing the state of Ashwatthama. She looks at him and realizes, just as I'm crying now because of the loss of my children, his mother will cry at his death. I don't want some other woman to suffer just like I'm suffering. This is the hallmark of a devotee, this very extreme level of empathy and compassion, right? She doesn't want the wife of Dronacharya to also cry. Also because Dronacharya was already dead, right? But the son is a representative of the father. Therefore, because Ashwatthama was still alive, in one sense, her husband or protection was still alive. But if Ashwatthama is killed, then what is this poor woman going to do? So Draupadi urged Arjuna that please forgive him, let him go. King Yudhishthir, also being very gentle and forgiving, agreed with Draupadi. He agreed that yes, but he has made a mistake, but let us forgive him. Let us forgive him and let him be. Bhima, however, who was one of the five Pandava brothers, urges Arjuna to kill Ashwatthama for having killed innocent children in their sleep, right? So now we have the conundrum here. There's a Dharma Sankat. On one hand, there was Arjuna's promise to Draupadi that I will bring the blood of Ashwatthama, I will bring you his head, right? There's the promise to Draupadi, and then, but now there's this tension of like forgiveness. Now Draupadi is saying, you forgive, and Bhima is saying, don't forgive, kill. Krishna actually also told Arjuna that you must punish this person. You must kill this son of a Brahmin. However, we will see now through the commentaries of the Acharyas that there is a subtle, deeper insight in Krishna's instruction to Arjuna to kill or punish Ashwatthama. So first, let us see what Srila Prabhupada writes. Srila Prabhupada writes, Lord Shri Krishna encouraged Arjuna outwardly just to test Arjuna's sense of duty, right? This is a very similar dynamic to what happens in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna tests Arjuna's sense of duty by saying, now you must fight your relatives. Now you must kill Dronacharya and Bhishma, right? Krishna was testing Arjuna. Where is your sense of duty, right? Are you free from illusion or not? So again, Prabhupada writes, Lord Shri Krishna encouraged Arjuna outwardly just to test Arjuna's sense of duty. It is not that Arjuna was incomplete in the sense of his duty. It is not that there was something wrong with Arjuna, nor was Lord Krishna unaware of Arjuna's sense of duty. Krishna was aware that he's a responsible person. He's a dutiful person. But Lord Shri Krishna put to test many of his pure devotees just to magnify the sense of duty. This is the key insight from Srila Prabhupada, who's helping us see that actually Krishna tests his devotees. Krishna tests his devotees because this is how he glorifies them, because their actions become immortal and then are discussed for many thousands of years. Imagine for an instance, I don't know if you've ever asked yourself this question. Sometimes I ask myself this question: is this all true? Is the Bhagavatam true? Did the Mahabharata war take place? Because there are scholars who say no, there was no such thing as the Mahabharata war. Where is the evidence? And then there's, of course, devotees who will say, of course it took place. It's there in Shastra, but there's no physical, tangible evidence, isn't it? So the doubt could emerge in one's mind, right? Did this all even take place? Let us suppose, for an instance, right now, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. I believe in these things. I'm not saying I don't believe in these things, right? But let's say someone has that doubt, right? Suppose you have this doubt. Suppose anyone on this call has this doubt, right? If watching this video has this doubt, is all of this even true? Or are these just stories meant to inspire people, right? Suppose we have this doubt. Maybe these are just nice stories to inspire good human character. But suppose, for instance, just imagine that it's all true. Imagine that there was a Krishna, there was the battle of Mahabharata, there was Arjuna and the five Pandavas. All of this is true, right? And if it's true, then still today, 5,000 years later, we're sitting in Chicago discussing what Arjuna did that afternoon or evening when he brought Ashwatthama back to his family to be punished. We're still discussing it today. That's called glorifying a devotee, right? There is no human being on earth today whose actions will be remembered 5,000 years later, right? We talk about, like this poor African man who was killed by the police officer in Minnesota, but give it 50 years, 100 years, he'll just become a name in the history books, right? The greatest human accomplishments will be nothing in 500 years, 1,000 years. People will just vaguely remember. We know someone like Alexander the Great existed, but we have no emotional awareness of who he was, what he did. You know what I'm saying? Nobody cares. It's not like anybody's life is affected by any of this, right? Nobody cares about these historical personalities, no matter how great or not great they were. This is just what happens in the material world. This is the value of human life. It's not that significant. But the Lord's devotees are special. The Lord's devotees are so special that Krishna finds opportunities to create moments where their greatness is glorified and then remembered 5,000 years later by people sitting in Chicago, Illinois, having a Sunday feast over Zoom. We're here talking about Arjuna. That's how Krishna glorifies his devotees. And that is the greatest glorification. The greatest glorification is a good reputation. Isn't it? This is what we learn in the 8th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam when Bali Maharaj is asked by Vamanadev, to offer him, where is Vamanadev asked Bali, where am I going to put my third step? You promised me 3 paces of land, 3 steps worth of land, but there is no room for me to put my third step, right? And if you don't fulfill your promise as a king, you have lost your reputation. And Bali Maharaj says there's nothing more painful for a person than to lose their reputation, right? Nothing hurts more than to lose our reputation. All the money in the world cannot make up for a loss of reputation. What does that mean? It means reputation is the greatest thing on earth. If you can earn a good name, right? If people think of you as a great person, as a wonderful person, that is more valuable than all the money on earth. But if you have all the money in the world, but nobody likes you, nobody thinks of you nicely, what's the use, right? So we see here that the greatest glorification that Krishna offers to his devotees is a great and wonderful reputation. So still 5,000 years later, we're discussing Arjuna's actions on that day, because this is how great his reputation is. This is how, I'm going to close this window here. Yeah. This is how great Arjuna is, and these are how great his actions are, that his reputation is still worth discussing 5,000 years later. So this is how Krishna glorifies his pure devotees. Let's look at the second quote by Sri Vishwanath. Arjuna is able to read between the lines. This is my sort of comment. Sri Vishwanath paraphrases. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is paraphrasing what Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna. He says, no Brahman should be killed. This is how Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. This is the Acharya's way of expressing Krishna's inner sentiment. No Brahmana should be killed. But Manu, who is Manu was the organizer of the laws of society. Just looking at my time here. But Manu has said that if an aggressor approaches with the desire to kill, he can be killed, even if he's learning in Vedanta, even if he's learned in Vedanta. In other words, according to the laws of Dharma, right, if an aggressor approaches you with the desire to kill you, then you can kill such a person. Although on one hand, you shouldn't kill a Brahmin, on another hand, if an aggressor approaches you with a desire to kill you, you have every right to kill, right? There's also a funny story where Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan, and the devotees were wondering if they should kill the mosquitoes. And there was a mosquito, and Prabhupada said, wait for it to attack. I remember this, Shuddha Kirtipu narrates the story. Prabhupada said, wait for the mosquito to attack. And as soon as he attacked, he took the first bite. Prabhupada said, now you can kill him. Because, until then he wasn't an aggressor. So follow both of these instructions ordered by me. The purport by Sri Vishwanath continues. Follow both of these instructions ordered by me, the maker of scriptures. I have said it is best to kill him, but do not be the cause of killing him. So Krishna is giving Arjuna this very sort of complex instruction. I have said it is best to kill him, Krishna is telling Arjuna, but I don't want you to be the cause of killing him. And then he says, follow both of these orders, that a Brahmana should not be killed, but at the same time, an aggressor should be killed. So what does Arjuna do? We see here, he cuts off, let me see if I describe it in the next slide. So he cuts off the hair of Ashwatthama. He takes off his hair. Now, of course, we as, brahmacharis and devotees and practitioners, we sometimes keep our heads shaved, out of cleanliness, but this is not the same kind of head shaving, This is not the same idea over here. Ashwatthama's hair was sort of cut off along with a jewel that he ties to his head as a sign of disrespect. His honor was taken away, right? His honor was taken away, and he was banished from the kingdom without any money or without any kind of, so his reputation was taken away, his respect was taken away. And in this way, although physically he was alive, he was kind of dead in a sense, because the loss of reputation is considered also a form of death. So this is how Arjuna was able to read Krishna's instructions and find a way through this conundrum. Should I kill him or should I not kill him? Right? So he found a way to kill Ashwatthama and not kill him at the same time. Now, what can we learn from all of this? What can we learn from all of this? There are certain considerations one has to take in mind when making certain decisions, right? Just like in this situation, in the global situation today with the coronavirus and the riots against racism and things like that, how are we supposed to decide, should I get involved or should I not get involved, right? This might be a question for some of us. Should I go to the protest or not? Should I contribute to some sort of fund for social justice or not? What should I do? Should I read the news about it or not? Well, let's see. What are some considerations one should think about when trying to make a decision in life? The first consideration for those of us who practice bhakti yoga is there any connection to a higher principle of authority? What has Srila Prabhupada, the Acharyas, our spiritual master, the Shastra, the sadhus, what do they say about this topic? And now we cannot accommodate every single person's opinion. So for most of us, we have our Shiksha gurus or our Diksha gurus, and then we have our mentors or senior devotees that we look up to, right? Like, so for example, in my case, when I have to find an answer to a philosophical question, then I often go to Jai Jagannath. Some of you know who Jai Jagannath is. He's in one sense you could say like an authority for me. So I find out, what does he think? What does Jai Jagannath think? Right? Then I might even go to my spiritual master. What does he think? So the first thing we have to ask ourselves when we make any decision in life, say for example, you get offered a job. I'll tell you a quick story. I have a dear friend. He goes to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He just finished his PhD. He was offered a job at Apple, right? Pretty nice company to work for, great benefits, lots of money. Turn it down. Why did he turn it down? Because they would make him work really, really hard. Instead, he took a job with a smaller company with a slightly smaller paycheck, right? But an opportunity which would allow him to live in a city where there were already quite a lot of devotees, right? And have devotee roommates. And in his own words, so I could improve my japa, right? What a beautiful realization. He turned down a higher paying, Indian grad student, right? And working for Apple, very prestigious, turned it down in order to have a lesser paying job at a smaller company. Why? So he could improve his japa. And probably because his guru or his mentor told him like, hey, you should work on your japa. So he thought, is there a connection to a higher principle or authority in this decision? And can I apply that? Another advice from the Shastra is consult 5 brahmanas. Before you make any big decision or any major decision in life, it's good to have a few consultants, a board of advisors, as I like to call it. The Shastra says 5, but I think sometimes even 3 or 4 will do, but definitely more than 2, right? And at least a minimum of 3 or 4. Consult 5 brahmanas or advisors, right? Seniors, thinkers, people who think about life, who have a little bit more experience. Consult them and just try to hear them out. Try to hear each of their opinions without adding any of our own value to their opinion, right? Just try to understand, what are they trying to say? When we're trying to understand how to act in a certain situation, it's very good to understand what is the other person trying to communicate before we try to add our own value to the discussion. Just understand, what are these people recommending or suggesting in this situation? Develop a purer state of consciousness. This is very, very helpful. Regularly work towards a pure state of consciousness. This is something that we all do as practitioners of Krishna consciousness. We chant our rounds, we read Srimad Bhagavatam, and we work towards a purer state of consciousness, because when our minds are more clean, when our consciousness is more pure, then good decisions will arise more naturally, right? There's a saying, the idle mind is a devil's workshop. In other words, nothing good can come out of an unclean mind, right? So if you're trying to make good decisions, then it's good to have a purer state of consciousness. And pray for the voice of Krishna to descend into our heart, right? This is, of course, a very important insight. We can never forget this insight. This is the most important insight. Actually, my Guru Maharaj likes to tell a story of how many years ago in Germany, the German government came to ISKCON and said, you owe us some like 120 million euros. And ISKCON was like, what for? And they said, for the last 20 years, you've been selling your books on the streets of Germany. You've paid no sales tax. So they said, you owe us this much money because we've calculated, we've spoken to your devotees, and we found out that you've distributed some X million number of books, and all these books have been sold without paying any sales tax to the government. So now you owe us. They came up with this number, 120 million marks. Deutschmarks was the currency in those days. This was in the 80s, early 90s. And so only 3 devotees in Germany knew about this conundrum, my Guru Maharaj and 2 other senior devotees. And they were very, very concerned, because if they couldn't come up with the money, then the government would force them to sell every single ISKCON property in Germany to somehow pay back that money. And they didn't want to tell the larger devotee community because it would create a sort of panic. So they didn't know what to do. And many days went by, and they were trying every practical thing. They consulted lawyers, they consulted, accountants, they consulted experts. They were trying everything practical to sort of solve this problem. And one day my Guru Maharaj said he was walking out of some office building, having spoken to some expert, and it suddenly struck him, I have not yet turned to Krishna. He said, we got so busy trying to solve the problem on a material level, trying to find the solution, I hadn't turned to Krishna in my heart and asked Krishna to guide us and help us. And he said from that day on, for the next, I believe, 14 days, when they had like a hearing in the court, he started chanting the Nrsinga Kavacha, which is a prayer for asking Lord Nrsingadev for his protection. And as he tells in the story, after 14 days, they had a tribunal hearing at the court, and the court said that the charge must be dropped, that ISKCON's work is religious work, it is work for the benefit of humanity, and the books weren't sold, they were distributed for a donation. So therefore, there cannot be a sales tax that can be applied. Something like this was the decision. That's not important. The important thing is that we have to, as practitioners of Krishna consciousness, pray for the voice of Krishna to descend into our heart when we have to make important decisions. And it sounds obvious. Doesn't it sound obvious? Like, turn to Krishna. Isn't that what we're trying to do? But believe me, I know for a fact, just looking at my own life, it's sometimes not the most obvious. Sometimes I myself get so busy with trying to solve things on a material level, thinking of like how to change this. Like with our preaching center, we always have so many logistical issues and preaching issues and this and that. And I get involved with trying to solve things on a material level in human relationships or with organization, that it's easy to forget that the answer is I have to also turn to Krishna. I have to let Krishna also have a voice. That, my dear Lord, what do you think should happen in this situation? It sounds obvious, but it's very easy to overlook. This is my personal experience. Finally, the Srimad Bhagavatam also recommends studying one's own intelligence. Prabhupada says the intelligence is the next door neighbor of the super soul, and therefore by studying one's own intelligence, one can sometimes find the answers that one is looking for. And there's a nice verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam here. An intelligent person, expert in perceiving the world around him and in applying sound logic, can achieve real benefit through his own intelligence. Thus, sometimes one acts as one's own instructing spiritual master. Beautiful verse, 11.7.20. And I'll read it again. An intelligent person, expert in perceiving the world around him, and in applying sound logic, can achieve real benefit through his own intelligence. Thus, sometimes one acts as one's own instructing spiritual master. Now, of course, we cannot use this verse to say that in all situations our intelligence will give us the answer, because the verse gives the qualification: an intelligent person who is expert in perceiving the world and applying sound logic, right, who has sound mind and intelligence, he can achieve real benefit through his own intelligence. Not anybody. So this is a key point. Nowadays, in the modern scenario, everyone thinks that they're perfectly capable of solving their own problems. They have all the answers. But if they have all the answers and they can solve their own problems, how did they get into a problem in the first place? You know, oftentimes in people, I find this so funny, people are having issues in their relationships, at work, in their families, with their children, and they don't look for help. Isn't that funny? Because if they don't look for help, they think that the answer will come from within them. But if the answer was already there within them, why would they get into the problem in the first place? Obviously, the answer isn't within us. That's why we're in this situation. If we knew all along what the right thing to do is, we wouldn't be in this situation today. So whenever we have issues in our families, relationships, work, our spiritual life, we can't solve these things on our own. And that's Krishna's way of telling us you can't do it on your own. Because if you could, you wouldn't be there in the first place. Because we're in this mess now, that's an indication that I need to get some help from somewhere else. But a person who has sound intelligence and logic and his mind is developed, such a person can actually solve his problems, or he would identify the problem before even getting into it. This is the point that's being expressed here. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of a pure state of consciousness, which I mentioned here, develop a pure state of consciousness, but I'm really conscious of time. So before I carry on any further, I do have one very important slide I want to go over. Actually, I have just two. But Yashodananda Prabhu, how much time do I have left? Because I also want to leave time for discussion or questions and answers. How much time do I have?
17 minutes.
Oh, fantastic. All right, great. So I speak fast, but now I'll speak super fast. No, I'm kidding. I won't speak super fast. I'll maintain a slow pace. But okay, so we just have 2 slides left, so please bear with me. So this idea of a pure state of consciousness, how does one develop that? I think it's very important to mention Vyasadeva Samadhi, which is discussed in the beginning of this chapter, of chapter 7. And I encourage all of you who are online to please read these 3 verses that explain Vyasadeva Samadhi and read the purports by Srila Prabhupada. What is it in context of? So basically, Narada Muni, who is the guru of Srila Vyasadeva, has come and chastised Vyasadeva for presenting literature that is mixed devotion with materialistic efforts and materialistic activities. And he wants Vyasadeva to present the pure truth, pure devotional service, and the activities of Krishna and the Supreme Lord, untainted by any sort of materialistic ideas, right? So Narada Muni has instructed his disciple to present that to the world. So Vyasadeva sits deep in meditation, and while sitting in deep meditation, he has what we call a samadhi, or a trance. It's when the material mind is no longer active and one establishes a direct link with a parallel reality, and information from that reality starts to enter one's consciousness. It's what we're all hoping for, by the way. One day, by elevating our consciousness by mercy, by endeavor, by the grace of Guru and Krishna, hopefully one day our own consciousness will enter into a state of trance, where our material mind is no longer active, right? While we're chanting, we're not just thinking about all the things we need to do, but by chanting the names of Krishna, we're actually connecting with that alternative reality, with another reality, and information from that reality is entering into our consciousness. This is called samadhi, right? Again, sorry for the truck that just passed by. If you didn't hear it, great. So what is the samadhi of Srila Vyasadeva? In his samadhi, in his state of trance, he saw three things. He saw the living entity, four things actually. He saw the living entity, right? He saw the Lord. He saw the external energy and their interrelationship. What does that mean? He saw how the external energy conditions the living entity to think of himself as a product of matter and therefore experience misery in this world, right? Because of the force of the external energy. The purports in this section are very long, but just to give a very simplistic idea, it is like this. Imagine this, 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 this is a pen, right? Inside this pen is the ink, right? What actually does the writing is the ink. This is just a case that holds the pen. In the same way, what is actually important is consciousness of the living entity, the Atma, but that Atma gets covered by various coverings. In this case, it's covered by plastic and all of that, right? So you refer to this as a pen. You don't refer to it as ink. Even though it's ink that's doing all the work, you think of it as a pen, right? Not the ink. It's a simple idea. The simple idea is that the living entity, under the influence of the external energy, thinks of itself as a product of matter, thinks of itself as a material entity who is meant to live in this world and do material activities and acquire material results and therefore suffer or enjoy as a result of those material results. He saw that. He saw the Lord, he saw the living entity, and he saw how the external energy conditions the living entity. He also saw the solution. This is the key point. He saw that by practicing devotional service, the living entity can break free from the influence of the external energy. He saw the culture of the Bhagavatam. He saw that by giving the Bhagavatam to people, this can be the answer for liberating the living entity from his material conditioning and its products like suffering and so forth, right? And what does that do? What does that liberation from material conditioning do for the living entity? We find in Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse 19, as soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness and he becomes completely happy. And what is the result of being established in the mode of goodness? In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, we find this very nice verse. O son of Pritha, that understanding by which one knows what ought to be done, what ought not to be done, what is to be feared, what is not to be feared, what is binding and what is liberating, is in the mode of goodness. All right. So why am I bringing up this point? I'm bringing up this point because when we make decisions, right, when we're looking at this global scenario, this global situation, or even situations in our own personal life, we have to make decisions. Well, we need the mode of goodness. And the mode of goodness is the product of the culture of the Bhagavatam. When we have the mode of goodness, we know what is to be done, what is not to be done, what is to be feared, what is not to be feared, what is binding and what is liberating. And this is very powerful information, right? If we know what we should be afraid of and what we should not be afraid of, we'll live a very proper life, right? And my last slide for the day, I wanted to talk about something called the circle of control, influence, and concern, right? So what can we learn from this circle here? This is a very important consideration given what's happening in the world today. We all have a circle of control, right? The circle of control is where we can individually do something, right? The circle of influence is where we can inspire others to do something, right? Like, for example, circle of control in an individual's life, maybe, for example, a very simple example is what happens in their house. Okay, what time does they wake up? What time do all the things happen in their house? Circle of influence could be I have some friends and I can inspire them to do things in their houses. Like some of you are preachers, Bhakti Vriksha leaders. You have a circle of influence. That is the people you preach to, the people you're sharing Krishna consciousness with. Your circle of control may just be your own immediate household. And then there's a circle of concern where you don't have control or influence, but you're concerned about it, right? So the first thing I'd like all of us to remember is we shouldn't misplace our energy, right? We should know what is my circle of control and influence and what is my circle of concern, and don't place energy in areas where you have no control or influence. You might be concerned about something, but it doesn't really mean anything because you have no control or influence, right? Bhakti begins at home. It begins right with our own personal life. Okay, in our immediate vicinity, the areas of our life where we have influence, do we speak out if some injustice takes place? I want to pose this question to everyone, right? So we might be concerned about some injustice happening in politics or somewhere else in the world or in other parts of the country. But what about in our own personal lives? Are we free from, like, when we go, suppose we go to the store or anything like that, or at work, Do we make any decisions, or do we say something that might be a little racist, that might be inappropriate? Have we made that transformation at that level? The reason why I'm bringing this up is because many times the people who study like psychological phenomena, spiritual phenomena, many times we're very concerned about something that's happening way outside of our circle of control and influence, somewhere else, and we neglect to implement action in our immediate circle of control and influence, right? And again, what did we learn from earlier in this chapter? A man is the product of his actions. So how we act is actually defining who we are, what is our character, right? So instead of thinking so much about areas in this world where we have very little influence, can we think about our immediate vicinity, the devotees we share our life with, our service with, our family members, our friends, our co-workers, and can we treat all of them with love, respect, devotion, compassion, as Krishna would want us to treat them? This is really where transformation begins. This is where activism should really start, is in our own circle of control and influence. And we should always remember that those decisions we make in that immediate circle will have a ripple effect beyond our reality, right? We shouldn't think that to make a change in this world, to have an impact in this world, that we need to do something way out there. We can make a decision, do something in our immediate circle of impact, and that will have a ripple effect that might affect somebody else. Like, for a simple example, we run Krishna Lunch, right? And I cannot solve the problem of world hunger. I can't. There's no way. I don't have the ability or the option or the access to solve world hunger. But we do use Krishna Lunch to feed homeless people in Chicago. We do deliveries to homeless shelters. We give food. I always make sure that when I leave the temple, that I always have a few boxes of Krishna Lunch. We give it out to homeless people on the streets, right? We make boxes just for the homeless. So this is our circle of control and influence. We cannot solve world hunger, but hey, nothing's stopping me from giving prasadam to all the homeless people between the temple and our preaching center, right? So this is where I'd like to pause. Maybe there was a lot of content shared today. I'm sorry, but I hope this was interesting, hopefully, and it wasn't too much to handle. Do we have any questions or comments? Yashodananda Prabhu?
So for those on YouTube, I invite you to submit your questions. There is one so far. So when you're talking about the circle of control or influence, there's an appreciation for the example you made about Krishna Lunch, but how to make sure, I guess, especially in situations where opportunities are a little less clear or direct, how to make sure that recognizing our circle of control or influence doesn't lead to apathy.
Right. Very good question. I think it all begins with a desire to do something. And if someone has a genuine desire to do something, to correct something wrong in this world, in themselves or in this world, then hopefully they can follow these steps that I outlined over here, which is considerations in making a decision, right? Discussions with some higher authority or principle, maybe reaching out to our mentors or our leaders and asking, hey, is there anything I can do to make a difference? What do you think, right? And then maybe consulting just 5 elders, brahmanas, advisors, thinkers, right? Our regular culture of bhakti, which creates a pure state of consciousness, and praying to Krishna, that Krishna, I want to do something. I want to do something to make a difference. I want to do something to live a better life, that other people can live a better life, that I can somehow have an impact, right? How should I do it? Every action begins with a desire and a thought. So I think somebody who has a desire and thought will never become apathetic, because opportunities will awaken for them. Pathways will open for such a person who has that openness to do something, to act in this world. Opportunities will arise, I'm convinced. There's no way that someone has the desire and wants to do something and is trying their best to find an outlet and nothing manifests for them. Anybody who is thinking and has a desire, then something will manifest. It's just having the desire is the first step, and then speaking to others. Perhaps people who are doing things. You can reach out to people who are doing things and find out, how can I get involved? And I'm sure they'll have advice. People love giving advice. Right. Anything else?
Let's see. Another question. Is there an order of, is there a hierarchy of the different considerations in making decisions? And my guess on that is, for example, developing a pure state of consciousness. It's not like I have to wait to be a pure devotee before I can make a decision. So maybe if you could just shed some light on if there's a hierarchy, like some go-tos, and then kind of descending.
Yeah, first, the first and foremost responsibility for every human being is to look at their responsibilities and duties, So for us as practitioners of bhakti, when we have to make our decisions, we have two responsibilities and duties. One, to our spiritual guides, our gurus and our mentors. We've taken on spiritual commitments to do certain spiritual activities. And then we have responsibilities and duties to perhaps our wives, our children, our parents. So the first step really is to look at our responsibilities and duties and see how will this decision impact my most important concern, which is my responsibilities and duties, right? The second thing is how will this affect my own personal state of mind, my own personal well-being, right? Some people would put the personal well-being first, they would put responsibilities and duties second. I would say I think it's smarter and perhaps more noble to put our responsibilities and duties first, right? And then think, how will this affect me personally? And then negotiate in that tension, right? So for example, say it could be a responsibility or duty. I'll just create a hypothetical scenario. Say, okay, like Yashodhana Prabhu, he's a very wonderful devotee and a grihasta. He has two beautiful children and a wife. And, one of his responsibilities is to provide emotional support for his family. And that might entail spending time with them, quality time with them, right? Many hours, taking care of the kids, spending time with his wife, right? But then he might notice that, I'm spending so much time with them. Where's my personal time? I need to go out for a walk or exercise or see an old friend or read a book, right? So then there's a tension there, like, okay, do I spend more time with them at the cost of my own welfare? Or do I focus more on myself but neglect my responsibilities and duties, right? And I think that for that, some practical guidance might be required from one's mentors or elders. But I think we should be aware of what our responsibilities and duties are, and at the same time be aware of our personal needs and well-being, and then navigate that tension with some intelligence and clarity and a desire to find the right answer. When there's a desire to find the right answer, what is that? How do I strike that right balance? Things can happen. It's amazing how powerful desire is as a force, right? If we have the desire to find the right balance, we should never forget that Super Soul is in the heart and he will guide us if we have that desire, right? If we actually have a desire to strike the right balance and figure out how to balance my responsibilities and personal well-being, Krishna will provide an answer, right? But if we're neglectful of our duties or too self-absorbed, right, then Krishna will see, okay, you're not a responsible person. You're not caring for your duties and you're just too self-absorbed, or vice versa. You don't ever think about your personal well-being. You're only absorbed in your duties and responsibilities. And Krishna will say, you're not taking care of yourself, right? So a balanced human being has that desire to strike a healthy balance, and then the answers will come from within. And of course, with the guidance of mentors and elders and people like that. So this is what I would say. I don't know if that addresses the question. Shilananda, what do you think? Does that kind of address the question?
I think so. I think so. It sounded like in your response, at least this is now I'm interpreting what you said, that really the default is that taking inventory of duties, which falls a lot into play of seeking the guidance from spiritual authorities in our lives
Well,
as an primary. That's how I interpreted what you responded with.
yeah, I mean, definitely seeking guidance from spiritual authorities is important, but also having one's own kind of self-awareness antenna sort of alert and observing one's, what are my needs as a person, and what do I need to grow, but at the same time, what are my responsibilities and duties, and striking a healthy balance. But it always begins with examining what are my responsibilities and duties in this stage of life, right? If I'm a brahmachari, what are my duties? If I'm a grihasta, what are my duties? If I'm on my way to becoming a grihasta, what are my duties? And what are my spiritual duties and commitments? And then what are my personal needs for well-being? And then how do I strike that balance,
Just to comment on what you're sharing, it's a really nice point that you're bringing up for all of us, especially because the pastime was Krishna was giving one instruction, Draupadi and his eldest brother were giving a different version of what the proper course of action is. And so Arjuna could have just said, well, Krishna said, so I'm going to do it, ignoring his other areas of duty, his other spheres of responsibility. So I really like how you brought that point out just in this last part of the discussion, because Arjuna had to assess what are my needs, what are my duties, and found a course of action that was satisfying to everybody.
Because he had a personal desire for revenge. So if he didn't act on it, he would be denying truth to himself. And he had made a commitment to Draupadi. At the same time, Krishna was telling him, now you must satisfy everyone. So he had that obligation to Krishna. So, an intelligent person is oftentimes part of a network of obligations, responsibilities, duties, and he cannot also forget his own personal needs. And if he's intelligent or if she's intelligent enough, they can figure out what to do on their own. Sometimes they might need some help, some guidance.
Awesome, thank you. And if you wanted to share any closing thoughts.
think I spoke a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Please read the chapter. That's my closing thought. Read the chapter and read Prabhupada's purports. They are exceptional. If you were convinced by my presentation today to read the chapter, I think my job is successful. And thank you, Shrilananda Prabhu, for hosting and giving me a chance to speak at the Sunday feast.
Many thanks for presenting. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.